Our last subject matter expert we're going to hear from is Rogine Reynolds. Rogine is a farmer, comes from a long farming background with her family. She's going to talk to us about some of the real impacts on Delta farms. Rogine?
While we're dealing with this, I'm going to make you laugh, but I'm going to set the record straight. I am not a farmer. I live on 2 acres on Roberts Island where I grew up, and the only things I grow are horse manure and weeds. Okay? But I'm a farmer's daughter. My family goes back to 1889. I'm going to give you kind of a simplistic view of BDCP, coming from the point of view of somebody who lives where it's going to have some serious impacts. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan has biological objectives. They're supposed to recover species. But we're not just talking about fish. We're talking about wildlife and plants. So they have conservation measures to protect at least 62,000 acres and restore 83,000 acres of high-value natural communities. They're planning on acquiring cultivated lands, establishing grasslands, and managing wetlands. And 34% of the acquisition of all of this acreage is supposed to happen within 10 years of the project approval. BDCP had a map out a couple of years ago that shows their habitat restoration opportunity areas. That's the red hatch marks. This is Upper Roberts Island, where I live, Reclamation District 544. This is Fabian Tract. This is Union Island here. This is where they want to establish upland habitat, ostensibly because it will be above any sea level rise. The next one. This is another one of their maps. This is current. By the way, you can't find that red hash mark map on the BDCP website anymore. They took it down. And now they have something that's kind of amorphous and soft and green. Okay? Now, we've been cultivating this land for 150 years. This is what it looks like. This is Rec District 544. My house is right about there. This is the San Joaquin River. I'm shaking. This is Old River. And this is Middle River. I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like habitat to me. Okay. We have a lot of crops out there. And I got a picture of a couple of them. We have it's diversified farming. We have grapes, almonds, olives, asparagus, wheat, tomatoes, melons, pumpkins, alfalfa, which you're looking at here, cucumbers, field corn, safflower, and others. And a lot of it is what you call habitat-friendly farming already. In a field like this, and there's one right behind my house, when they take the hay off and irrigate it, I've seen as many as 60 Swinson hawks in a 40-acre field. And corn, of course, after you harvest it, the birds come to. That's already been mentioned in context of the cranes. This Delta ag industry produces 12,000 jobs, and an economic output to the counties in the Delta, Yolo, Sacramento, Contra Costa, Solano, San Joaquin, of over $2.647 billion, and that's according to the Delta Protection Commission's Economic Sustainability Plan. And the problem is that the BDCP's habitat conservation goals threaten to take out of production nearly 20% of the farmable Delta land. And they're going to do this using eminent domain. Now, the BDCP's plan says we're going to use willing buyers, willing sellers. But at one of the BDCP meetings, I challenged Jerry Merrill on that point. I said, what if you have a field that's in between 2 others, and those guys sell out, and you're there? He says, one man can't stop a freeway. There is a solution. And Delta farmers are willing to cooperate. Delta reclamation districts are willing to cooperate. And this is what needs to be done. Some restoration, go ahead, can be done on the inside and outside of what we call fat levees. Go ahead. This is some habitat that's on Union Island right now. It's fallow land that hasn't been farmed, and I don't know why. Maybe it gets some seepage. On the left side of it is a cross levee, and the trees that you see there up in the top, that's Middle River. And I don't know, there might be 60 acres of this. Go ahead, the next one. And then along the opposite side of the Wing Levee Road, there's this Council of Governments habitat that was established about 5 years ago. And it's a small piece. It's only like, I don't know, 10 acres. It's not very much. COG bought the ranch, established the easement, planted this and got it started, and then sold the ranch back to a farmer who has to farm and not damage this. It cost a lot of money. And countywide, I talked to Steve Mayo over at COG, and they really only established about 11,000 acres of any sorts of easements or habitat in the county. And if you understand how that works, if a developer wants to develop a project, then they pay COG, and COG goes out and they find land to mitigate for the development. Go ahead. So that's some natural habitat and man-made habitat. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is a fat levee. And I've got several pictures of them. They're up around Jones Track. After the flood a few years ago, East Bay Mud and the state and the Reclamation District got their heads together and they beefed up these levees. Look at that land side. Look at the space here. Why can't we beef up our levees in this delta? And the estimate's been at about $4 billion to make the whole levee look about as strong as that, and plant their habitat on it. Why do you have to take land out of production? It can be done. And I'm going to remind you of something. This is terrestrial habitat. This isn't going to help the fish, but it can be done. You can go ahead and, okay. This is what some of that fat levee planting looks like on the water side. They've got some trees coming up. Go ahead. That's another view of that. Okay. This is looking down one of those roads. Look at the space. It can be done, ladies and gentlemen. Now, BDCP habitat restoration is considered a public benefit and is to be funded primarily through straight water bonds. The cost is estimated, when you add the interest, at about $7 billion. But I'm going to warn you that the BDCP plan also contains language that says they will use other or old unused bond money, and they will use it for this land acquisition. So we're not out of the woods even if you happen to defeat a water bond. I'm not opposed to habitat restoration, but I want it to be done where it makes some sense and where it doesn't put people out of business. Because if you're paying interest on a bond, you're a taxpayer paying to put other taxpayers out of business. I think I've gone long.
I want to thank all of our speakers today. It's been very informative. I also want to welcome, we had a representative from Assemblymember Susan Bonita's office, Tommy Riley Vanderbroeker, joined us. So thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Assemblymember, we appreciate that. What we're going to do now is we're going to hear some comments from our legislators. And I think it's very important not only that they share with us their perspective, but also what we can do to help them do their job to represent us. So first we're going to hear from State Senator Lois Walk.
Thank you. I think they do a great job. We have great experts, by the way. Thank you. And all of you in the audience who have helped them with the impacts and the effects on the ground of this BDCP. But you know, just to take a 30,000-foot view of this, we frankly are in a struggle for a very rational water policy statewide in California. And this struggle to preserve and restore the most extraordinary San Joaquin-Sacramento Delta is only part of that effort, but it is an extraordinarily important part, and that's where the action is right now with the BDCP. We have the struggle for BDCP will certainly for the next, occupy us for the next 2 years at least, but certainly most of the action will happen over the next 2 years. And we have certainly, we have the science and the facts on our side. We have the cost and the financing and the economics on our side. And frankly, both Melinda Terry and many of you, Melinda Terry as well as Jeff Michael, have given us the facts and have really waded through the 20,000 pages and given us the ammunition we need. But what we're really going to need to do is form allies and reach out and persuade others. And our success will be dependent upon that. We need to form coalitions and persuade others. And I'm looking at Southern California. I'm looking in particular at San Diego. The more enlightened urban users of Delta water, coastal counties, which some of which have interest in Delta water, others that have no interest but vote. And it's important that they be on our side when they do. The Northern California should be our ally, in particular the coastal counties, certainly the Bay Area, and the upstream Sacramento Valley folks. These are coalitions that are forming and are very important in our being successful in our effort for a rational and reasonable water policy, both for our area and statewide. What's going on in the legislature? The BDCP has had a tendency to suck the air out of the room. There are other water issues and which will help us if we sort of, our energy in the legislature should be to sort of remind people that there's more to water policy than the BDCP. And why that's an important thing for us to do in the legislature is that the things we want to do, that other communities want to do, and that we can form coalitions with them on, are the things that will help restore and maintain and preserve the Delta. Things like regional water supply. Let's assist other regions statewide in regional water self-sufficiency. Get off the Delta. Stop importing water. Diversify your water supplies. Let's all do more conservation. Let's clean up the groundwater that we've polluted. There's a lot of groundwater that's polluted. It would cost us less to clean it up than it would to build these tunnels. So let's do the most cost-effective items that will help us all. I've introduced a bond, SB 42. What different, and there is another bond from the Assembly, and I'm sure Susan will speak to that. What's unique about this bond is that it is to have nothing to do with the BDCP. It is to focus on all the things I just talked about, regional self-sufficiency, conservation, and the Delta as well. The key area of difference between our bond and the Assembly, and there are plenty, but they're really very similar in nature. But there are two areas that are very important to the Delta and very important to us. One, who controls the Delta money? There is close to $1 billion in both bonds that comes to the Delta. Who controls the money? I believe it must be the Delta Conservancy. It must be, particularly if there is habitat involved. We control the money. The Delta Conservancy controls that funding. And the second important area is that we need to incorporate in the entire bond the goal of reducing reliance on the delta. You get more money, you get higher points if you reduce reliance on the delta. So those projects everywhere else in the state, whether conservation, cleaning up groundwater, whatever, drinking water quality, you reduce your reliance on the delta and you move to the head of the line. So those are two very important concepts: control over the money that comes to the delta and incorporating the goal of reducing the reliance on the delta. So I think I'm going to stop and just end with this. I started by saying that this is a struggle, and it is not a struggle just for today and this month. This is a struggle that will go on, and it will go on for years, and it's not a struggle for the faint of heart or for sunshine patriots. Restore Your Delta needs your money. How crass is that? The fact is, it does. And we're going to need funding in order to make clear throughout the state that there are better solutions to be had. And to do that, Restore the Delta and others, Food and Water Watch and others, are going to need money. That's what it's about. And we're going to have to take it to Southern California, which means ballots, initiatives, and they're all expensive. And make no mistake about it, we're going to have to do that. So come on along.
I'm going to chime in and make my own pitch here along with Lois, especially to those elected officials we have in the room today from our other San Joaquin County cities and communities. The Delta Coalition needs your cities to be re-engaged with the coalition so that we are speaking with one voice for our entire county. So go back to your councils. Many cities pass a resolution stating that they've and continue to support the work of the Delta Coalition, but we're not seeing regular attendance by elected officials or your staff. We need that. We need you to be there with us so that you're part of the work that's going forward. Now we're going to hear from our other state senator in the room, Kathleen Galgiani. Kathleen, thank you for being here with us.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say if this is true, this is a dream come true for all of us, because high-speed rail is being built from Fresno to Bakersfield, so I would say the problem would be solved. As you know, the governor's proposal for tunnels is a debate that we've had in the state for more than 30 years. And earlier, when the voters rejected it, it was known as the peripheral canal, and now, of course, it's known as the tunnels. So the governor continues to push this take it or leave it menu of one option, and all we are doing is pitting farmers against farmers without adding actually any additional supply. I believe that for the sake of farmers and for the environment and our community and the state's water supply, that we need to fund the repairs to the Delta, and we need to invest money in storage, not tunnels. Water stored at the Shasta Dam and Oroville Dam, which is actually the tallest in the country, provides water that flows through the Delta, and that is why it is in the state's interest to invest funds to repair the Delta levees. What alternatives do we have to the tunnels? Well, California's snowpack is actually the greatest investment in water supply, providing the greatest supply of additional storage. And California has approximately 40 million acre-feet of water stored in dams and reservoirs, approximately 1,200 dams and reservoirs now. But the state has not built a large capacity dam since the construction of the New Melones Reservoir and Dam in 1979. Now we've had 4 smaller capacity projects since that time, since 1979. One being Los Vaqueros Dam and raising that. But to put this into perspective, New Melones Dam added 2.4 million acre-feet of storage, and the project at Los Vaqueros only added 160,000 acre-feet of storage. What are some of the options for additional storage? Temperance Flat continues to be a viable option. It's proposed to be constructed just above Friant Dam along the San Joaquin River in Fresno and Madera counties. This will supplement the storage along the San Joaquin River basin by capturing spring water flows that would otherwise be lost to sea because we don't have enough capacity in high runoff years. In 2006 alone, the state lost more than 1.2 million acre-feet of water just from water that was lost to sea instead of being captured off the San Joaquin River from the Friant Dam area. At a cost of 1.6 to 2.4 million, this project would nearly quadruple the supply for our Central Valley Basin, and it would reduce the need for groundwater extraction in the South Central Valley. As the governor and the administration continue to argue the merits of the BDCP, I think that the state and the legislature should be looking at other alternatives that could bring on additional regional projects sooner with greater certainty, less environmental disruption, and at a lesser cost, and again with greater certainty for completion. That's why I, for several years now, have introduced legislation that would require the Department of Water Resources to create a database, essentially an inventory of regional water projects throughout the state that could come online sooner, cheaper, and with greater certainty. I envision an inventory that would list the projects, track their status and their projected completion date, track the projected amount of funding and the potential funding sources. And I think that would give the legislature and the governor the ability to see a side-by-side comparison so that we could realize that there are actually better options out there for all of us. I think that these regional projects must include money for groundwater cleanup and the cleanup of contamination in our aquifers. For example, in the San Gabriel Valley, where they provide 90% of water for nearly 1 million Californians, they have just spent $20 million on a groundwater cleanup project where they're taking clean water and recharging it into the aquifer. This was as a result of a court case with Northrop Grumman. The state should do more to regulate groundwater cleanup in areas in Southern California in particular, where we have the opportunity to give these areas regional self-sufficiency and reduce their dependence on the San Joaquin Delta. My legislation for an inventory of projects throughout the state has not passed, but that hasn't stopped me. I have worked with the Delta Coalition, San Joaquin County Public Works, and others, and we have put together a starting point for agreement of projects that could come online with state help and assistance with funding. I think that the solution to the state's water problems in large part lies with many of you who are here, who have studied the state's water system over a number of years. A number of you partnering with some of our regional partners in Southern California who have also worked for a number of years to come up with realistic plans for regional projects that will reduce reliance on the Delta. I want to thank all of you for your work. We have a lot of work to continue to do, and I think that all of you have really set the stage for the kind of discussions that we need to continue for the state's water supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Now we're going to hear from Assemblymember Susan Talamantes Eggman.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming out here, because you really are where the rubber meets the road. It really is the community engagement, I think, that has allowed us to get as much traction as we have. If you all weren't as active as you were, I'd say those tunnels would already, they'd be starting construction by now. But it's folks who have really held the line for all these years and have made a difference. So during my time on the council, I served in the Delta Protection Commission with Supervisor Roostaller, and I was just thinking, well, always asked me what was some of the best things I did. One of them was, I think, was hiring Dr. Jeff Michaels to do that economic feasibility study. I see the supervisor also here. So the fight has been going on a long time, and people talk about it's a science versus this, and I'll also just throw in, it's also an issue of politics. And it's also an issue of politics that we can never divorce ourselves from, which is why we have to do this smart. We can't just be right, we also have to be smart about it, and about how we go about it. So it's coalitions like this that make a difference. Because as much as Regine Reynolds wants to, maintain her way of life in the farming community, there's folks in the South counties who want to do that same thing. And as a chair of agriculture, I get the unenviable task of sitting talking to them when they're really screaming about water, because it's their way of life too. So how we craft solutions and how we go about it, I think, must be delicate and must be with sensitivity. That I'm optimistic enough still to think that nobody's a real evildoer in this, but it is just a lot of competing interests that bash together right here in the Delta in our backyard. So it feels, and it is very emotional for us. So this is my first in the legislature. Certainly Senator Wolk and Senator Galgiani have been at this a whole lot longer than I have. But my sort of part in talking to you today, I think, is as Senator Wolk said, there is a bill on her side for a water bond in the Senate that she is the author of. And on the Assembly side, we are working on a bill also. One of the differences with ours is the Speaker assigned a working group. So we have a working group of representatives across the state who are working on the water bond. I represent the Delta area, and it could have been any one of us, because I'll tell you, everybody who's going to talk to you today, we sing with a united voice when we're up at the Capitol. Jim Frazier's going to talk, Yamada's not here, Kristen Olson, everybody sings with the same voice that we need to be listened to. So I represent the Delta on this working group. We're trying to get a water bond down under double digits because we don't think anything else is going to pass. And one of the first things I did on that water working group was do a trip out here to the Delta for members who have never been out here, who don't live here. And they came and we spent a day and we traveled around and we talked to farmers. We had lunch at Juicy's and really gave them a Delta experience. Some of the principles that we've been able to craft are things that I always pick up my paper like I'm getting ready to walk out of the room, because they know they need the Delta in order for any kind of bond to pass. So one of the things that we've been able to do, just like Senator Wolk's bond, is divorce any language of the BDCP from that bond. We've been able to prioritize things like regional self-sufficiency. We've been able to increase things like, if you get money from the grants that this bond will provide, you have to have a community partner in order to apply for it. So ours is not saying it goes to the Conservancy, but it's saying if you're doing something in the Delta, you must have a regional local partner to do a grant. We have also said for the and I don't know this will stay in, but we've been able to at least keep out for now, talking about co-equal goals, because I think that benefits or elevates one issue higher than the others. And ours is saying for habitat restoration and levees is what the money is there for, or whatever else. We have also prioritized infrastructure improvement. So it shouldn't be just about creating new infrastructure, but also improving the infrastructure that we have. The city of Stockton, the city of Los Angeles, any city that's been around here has old cracked pipes running under our cities and under our counties that lose a lot of water all the time. That could also, that's an easier fix than creating big giant things. Now, Catherine talked about storage. Storage is also a very politically, everybody gets very excited when we talk about storage. But it is a solution that we need to consider carefully. Underground storage probably is something that might be a little bit easier to get through. But these are all issues that we are all working on and focusing on to try to divorce it from the BDCP. On the water working group we have, I've partnered very well with West Chesbrough, representing the Klamath and all the North counties. We have Kevin Mullen out of South San Francisco. We have Rich Gordon from the Santa Cruz area, and I can tell you they are all very strong allies. I think it was the first time Henry Perea, who represents the Westlands, was up here in the Delta, and he did enjoy his experience at Justy's. And he was amazed at how things look, how green things are when there's water available. Of course, I told him that's where God put the water, Henry, and this is where they want us to farm. And then we also have Tony Atkins from San Diego, who understands and is with us. We have Raul Bocanegra, and then the chairperson of that board is Anthony Rendon, who's out of Los Angeles, but he's an environmentalist, so he sort of gets it. So I can tell you the tenor in our meetings really are of trying to produce a bond that does not have anything to do with the BCP. We all know that that infrastructure money is needed. Some communities don't have any water to drink, and that should not be what's going on in California in this day and age. So we continue to meet. Hopefully between these two bonds, one of them will make it, and they'll both be good for us and at least not destroy us, because at the end of the day, it really is a fight that must be done with consideration of statewide issues. And so thank you all very much for being here today and giving me a couple minutes to speak, and I will remain around afterwards to answer questions. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Assemblymember Jim Frazier. Thank you, Jim.
Good morning. It's almost lunchtime, so I'm going to try to get this out of the way for you guys. But I would like to thank the Delta Coalition for bringing us all together here today. And as an assembly member that represents a large portion of the Delta, preserving and protecting this unique and valuable resources is important to me as all of you. I come here today to speak to you in two capacities. First, like so many of my colleagues, I'd like to speak for the Delta. To speak for its people, its wildlife, and the environmental and economic communities that call the Delta their home. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan is not a conservation plan at all. A plan that proposes to build two 35-mile-long, 40-foot wide tunnels under some of the most critical and sensitive habitat in the state is not a conservation plan. A plan that will rob the Delta estuaries of critically needed water that sustains not only environmental communities, but recreation and economic communities is, again, not a conservation plan. A plan that does not contain a clear path to the Delta Restoration Program, and now how that program will be funded is not a conservation plan. Which brings me to the second reason I come before you today. As the chair of the Assembly Committee on Accountability and Administrative Review, it's my responsibility to ensure transparency and accountability for state programs with statewide significance. The BDCP in its current form contains a funding structure that is not only incomplete, but riddled with uncertainty. The current plan contains a funding structure that assumes significant contribution from both state and federal sources that, I believe, is not only uncertain, but unrealistic. This uncertainty puts a risk both to water ratepayers who see increased water bills and taxpayers who might find themselves on the hook to bail aid a plan that contains no funding guarantees. As a result of the funding uncertainties and the risk to ratepayers and taxpayers, I have asked the Speaker of the Assembly for permission for my committee to convene a hearing to explore these issues. I plan on bringing together experts, all of whom are here today, and some others, both inside and outside of the administration, to address these issues and shed additional light on the precarious funding structure for the BDCP. Again, I'd like to thank the Delta Coalition and the legislative leaders that have come here today for inviting me, and looking forward to our ongoing debate and discussion on these critical issues. I look forward to the Delta Restore the Delta committee to work with them ongoing. I will let you know after their last event, I did pick up my signs from Barbara, and they are in my office facing down on the governor's courtyard, so he can see them every day. Thank you.
switching places with, I'm switching places right now with Kathy Miller, who is taking care of our press event. So next is Larry Roostaller, Supervisor Larry Roostaller. He's serving his second term, representing District 2 on the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors. He serves as chair of the Delta Protection Commission. He's also a member of the Delta Stewardship Council, which was created by the Delta Reform Act of 2009. He's been an essential force in advocating our Delta interests, not only on the local and state levels, but also in Washington, D.C., as a member of the Delta Counties Coalition and the San Joaquin Flood Control Agency. So let's welcome Supervisor Larry Roostaller.
Thank you very much. Thought I had a couple minutes more. Kristen Olson was here. I guess she got called out. But. So, for those of you who can't read 20,000 pages, you can read the new California Water Action Plan. I think it's 17 pages, and it is full of wonderful things. Not too many details, but lots of wonderful things. All right. My job is to, in less than 10 minutes, deal with the present and future Delta. That won't happen. But what will happen is I'll do a quick recap of some of these comments and things that have been made this morning. My first question is, have they kept their promises? Only surplus water will be exported. No area of origin shall be deprived of water to meet the beneficial needs of the watershed. There is no intent of the Bureau of Reclamation to ever divert a single acre foot of water which might be used on the valley now or later. Those are all quotes. I stole them all from Dante and John Herrick. Can we trust the promises and assurances contained in the Delta Reform Act of 2009, the Delta Plan, or the draft BDCP? The failure of the state to conduct a full benefit cost analysis of the BDC2 is blatant. Dr. Jeff Michael's benefit cost study clearly shows that $1 of benefit will be accrued for every $2.50 that we spend. I guess what we're going to do is lose, a little money on each transaction, but we'll make it up in volume. You would like to think that the state would do everything they could to disprove and discredit his study. They're very silent on that. Rather, they put forth a simple financial analysis that they believe covers their butt. I consider it to be pretty much of a sham, and to steal a line from the radio show on NPR from the Tablet brothers, that's bogus. How do we tell the real Delta story? Well, water defies gravity. It flows uphill towards money and votes. We must reach out to the people of the South Bay, the San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. We must put ourselves in their shoes. What do they want? What do they need? What do we as Californians need to do to sustain and enhance our state's economy? How do we craft a truly statewide water solution? How do we continue to stress the Delta as a place? Protect and enhance the unique culture, recreational, and agricultural values of the Delta, while restoring the ecosystem, the fisheries, and the wildlife. I don't see how you do this by taking more water out of the estuary. Determining flow is paramount. What volumes, temperatures, quality, timing, those are all questions that need to be answered before you decide to build tunnels. Ag is the Delta. 75% of the primary zone is prime farmland. 87% of the primary zone is in ag. I believe it's over 200 crops are presently grown in and around the Delta. That's what we call diversity. It's not pistachios, it's not pomegranates. We grow almonds up here, Delta soils are actually 50% more productive than the state average. Why then do we propose taking, give or take, 150,000 acre-feet of prime farmland out of production and divert it to habitat? Fish need water. That's simple. Large habitat conservation projects need water. Exporters want a guaranteed quantity and quality of water. One of the two co-equal goals. They want this even during the dry and the drought years. If water is diverted from the North Delta, it never gets to the South or the Central Delta. These areas, water quality becomes further degraded. How can you sustain ag or restore fish species in these areas with less water and poorer quality water? Science should be used to answer these questions. Save the species, sustain ag, not justify a preconceived premise in the BDCP. Their theme is the cost. From those friendly folks who brought you the new Bay Bridge, 4 times over budget, years past due, and some say not even going to stand up to the earthquake. Who's going to pay for this? The export communities say they will. But who are they? People of California, taxpayers, the ratepayers. Higher water rates, state and local taxes for direct and indirect project costs, environmental studies, O&M, and the financing costs. But the real hidden cost, I believe, is that you suck all the money out of the room. There's no money at the state or the federal level to do the projects that were spoken of as far as regional self-sufficiency. And as was touched on by Susan, look at the problem we have with all of the aging in Stockton. We were born in 1850, this town. Sacramento, 1850. Actually, Sutter came a little earlier. But I don't think he put too many pipes down. The problem is we have old pipes, leaky pipes. We have old infrastructure. You have sewer plants that need upgrading. You need water treatment plants that need upgrading. If you take all the money and put it into the tunnels, you will not have that money to do those needed infrastructures. And what about education, transportation, health and human services? There are a lot of other things that will go begging because of that. All for a project that doesn't get you one more drop of water. So, I made a couple of quick notes here. One, I stole a lot of this stuff from Mike Machado, who presented it in a speech last week at the State of the Estuary. If you're wondering who designed these beautiful muck pyramid pictures that we have from San Joaquin, he's in the far back corner. That's Brandon Nakagawa. I'd like to thank Don Natoli, County Supervisor from Sacramento, who's got most of the Delta and lives up in the Galt area. His wife works here. Bottom line is, Don served 3.5 years on the Delta Stewardship Council, and I just stepped up to that. He has done more as chairman of the Delta Protection Commission and on the Stewardship Council to represent the 5 Delta counties. Did he win many fights? No, but he got on the record. He made points that we all needed made. Mary Pico, who's here from Contra Costa, is vice chair of the Delta Protection Commission and will replace me in about 13 months when I go off into the sunset. So, we basically have 2 of the folks that have been and will be your voices at the state level. I want to thank San Joaquin County staff who basically make Kent Vogel and I look better than we should every day and who preserve the institutional memory of this whole water issue. Thank you to the presenters, thank you to the elected representatives, some of which are old hands, some of which are new to the water world. Remember, stick together and continue to tell the Delta story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. We are very fortunate in our county to have such well-respected, hardworking, and really knowledgeable representatives fighting the fight for us. We've collected a few questions here. If anybody's got some extras, pass them on down. We don't have much time. I promise I'm going to get you out of here at noon, but we have just a few minutes. And I'm not sure who this one should go to, but as we remember from Watergate, we should always follow the money. Who's going to make money if BDCP goes forward? Anybody want to comment on that?
I'll take that one. Probably the best one to take that one. 70% of the water taken from the Delta goes to the Western Water District, Kern County Water Agency. We have key players like Stuart Resnick of Paramount Farms, who has been involved in political contributions and pushing forward this process. One of the things that we're very interested in looking at if we restore the Delta that we're finishing a map on is if you look at the drainage and care lands in the Central Valley, lands that shouldn't be farmed, that should be taken out of production, and you take a map and you overlay the proposed fracking sites for California, can't help but notice the pattern. We're not saying that fracking will end up using all the water, but there is this question, especially when you look at some of the reporting that was done 3 or 4 years ago about how Stuart Resnick has been able to resell water. And if you look at recent minutes from the Kern County Water Agency, where they are trying to figure out, if we pay for this project, are we going to be able to transfer that water out of our district? When you compare that, and you compare the potential for fracking in California, it does make you scratch your head and wonder what is happening in the big picture.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, okay. Just when it comes to the people receiving water, it's hard to know how much they're going to benefit when they don't have a financial plan. I mean, under the way they talk about paying for it, it's hard to see how any farmer in the southern San Joaquin Valley can benefit from this at all. But they don't have a plan yet. But it is clear who's going to benefit from it, and that is basically large construction firms and the consultants that have been benefiting from BDCP through the original expenditure of $250 million. And so all those who get to do the work and are going to receive paychecks because of the billions and billions and billions of dollars that are contemplated here are probably the beneficiaries. It's not clear whether the ratepayers of the state are beneficiaries. In fact, they probably are not.
Can I add something to that a little bit? I don't need the mic, I have a big mouth. When CalFed came through here for 7 or 10 years, they spent $4 billion. Now, who profited from that? And I'm going to second Jeff here and Barbara, the consultants, the government agencies to plan things and evaluate grant applications and projects. Those are the people that immediately prospered from these huge undertakings. But we didn't even get a fish screen in the South Delta, and they spent $4 billion out here.
And one thing I'd like to add is that one of the things that we wrote about a couple weeks ago is if you look at who some of these contractors are, these are some of the same major contractors who are involved in work in the Iraq reconstruction. And if you take a look at how much federal money they receive and what a poor product they put out, I find that just as alarming, that we could be spending billions of dollars for construction of a project. Okay, we're against the project, but if their track record often indicates that they don't even deliver what it is that they're supposed to deliver for the money that's spent.
We have a lot of questions in here that refer to some specific, as we were talking about, regional self-sufficiency projects, capturing stormwater for a source of new water, that sort of thing. Desalination, that's the efficiency is increasing because of wind energy. It's becoming more cost effective. These are exactly the kind of regional projects. And when we talk about the question here on all of these is why aren't we looking at these? Why isn't this moving forward? This is what we're talking about. If we divert all of the financial resources to a project that will not improve our water supply, we won't have the money to research these kinds of projects or to provide funding for them to go forward. So it's vitally important that we do this smart and we do it in a cost-effective way. This is one for John. How can this underlying illegal idiocy be stopped? Are we looking ultimately at action in the courts? Will that be a companion strategy? Where do you think this is headed?
Well, I'm always opposed to litigation. Sorry. However, I'm being dragged into it. There is no doubt that as this proceeds, there will be litigation. Now, of course, if the project is stopped or reconfigured and something radically different happens, that'll change. But as we view it, there are a number of statutes and regulations that are not being complied with. And so if you move forward on a plan that doesn't fit the criteria of habitat conservation plans, or doesn't abide by area of origin law, or doesn't abide by the Delta Protection Act, or doesn't meet water quality standards, there will be challenges. The ultimate decision may come from a superior court, or excuse me, an appellate court, or the Supreme Court. But that's common in the water world. People fight, and then it eventually gets resolved, and they move on to a new fight. But there will be litigation. Sorry.
And we're going to wrap up with this last question, and it really goes to our legislators. With no science, poor economics, and eventual or inevitable runaway costs, why isn't this bad idea dying? When will it implode? Does anybody want to comment?
It probably isn't good. And what will make it impossible is the fact that those contractors who need to support this effort will have to convince their ratepayers and the boards that it is in fact a worthy expenditure versus other expenditures that they're going to need and they already need. For years, the state of California has been asking local communities and water districts to do integrated regional water management plans to figure out what you need, what kinds of things, again, coalitions at the local level, what kinds of projects in the water area are necessary for a high quality, good, reliable water supply. And what's happened is that many communities throughout the state are waiting for water bond money, for the state to match that kind of money, to leverage that money in order to do the things they want to do. This BDCP has been a left turn, a right turn. It's been a diversion from many of the ongoing needs that water districts have. And when I talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room and sucking all the air out of the room, that's what's happened over the past couple of years. And what is happening is that many water districts are recognizing that, wait a minute, this is getting way out of hand. I'm not sure I'm going to be moving forward with money or asking my ratepayers for 20 to 30% or more rate increase in order to fund something that isn't going to give me what we've been studying that we need. So I thought that train, whatever it was sort of interesting. But again, you have a governor, but don't take solace from what I just said. The fact is we have a governor and an entire water establishment that supports this and wants it to happen. And that means you have to engage, you have to push, and we have to do it over long term.
Earlier this year, I participated in a water hearing where Senator Wolf was present and Senator Pavley, and we had a presentation from John Laird, who's the Secretary of Resources. And after all of the information about BDCP, I asked the big question, when will you be coming before the legislature to request an appropriation to move forward with the project? And the answer was, we're not. We have authority without the legislature to move forward because it's going to be funded privately with different districts and ratepayers, etc. and therefore authorization is not required by the legislature. And Senator Wolf will remember after her big discussion in our caucus meeting, I raised my complaint that other projects in the state, high-speed rail, for example, voters passed it. Before a dime is spent on the project, there's a set of criteria that has to be followed, and the authority must request an appropriation from the legislature. Then, before they even spend a penny of what's already been appropriated, they have to again come before the legislature and the Department of Finance to detail whether any change has been made to the plan before they spend that money. Yet, this project is moving forward at the state level for billions and billions of dollars, likes that we've never seen, and there is no legislative input or involvement or approval required for the project to move forward. That is at the crux of the problem, that this is able to move forward without our shutting it down.
Just to add to that briefly, I also think it's imploding. I mean, there's not as much talk about it. The last couple times you've heard the governor speak, this is not the ban he's waiting right now. And if we are effectively able to cut off any state bond money going towards that, then it is going to have to, they're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it. Which I think more and more, as all of you are doing all this great work and the word is getting out and we're forming statewide coalitions, people are like, why are we going to pay more money for something that doesn't look to be science-backed? So I also think it's imploding, but that doesn't mean we take our eye off the ball for 1 second. So I just say we keep up the fight and we keep doing what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, we're just afternoon. We're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you all again for being here, for being so engaged, for hanging in here the whole time. Special thanks to our subject matter experts, our legislators. We appreciate the work you do on our behalf tremendously. Again, we are very fortunate to have such really well-qualified, hard-working, and dedicated folks representing us in our capital. So thank you again to all of our other cities in San Joaquin County. Stay engaged with the coalition. It is important. You heard this fight is not won yet, and we need to be on top of this. We need to be speaking with one voice, and we all need to understand what's at stake here. So thank you again very much. Thank you to University of the Pacific for providing this beautiful venue for us to have this. Thanks to all the support staff from both the coalition, all of our cities, counties, that, as Larry said, make us all look good and help us do our job all the time. So thank you all very much.